There's so many people out there that are practicing stuff that suck. They're not doing good. The dog's not performing at the level that they should be. The reason why most of the practice that people do is really ineffective is because they're sloppy. It is about perfect practice makes perfect. The reason why most of the practice that people do is really ineffective is because they're sloppy. They're not slowing down and taking the time to get repetitions in a way that is really crystal clear to the dog. How consistent we are in our repetitions will determine the quality of those repetitions. So if every time I command my dog, I'm inconsistent with the tone or the voice that I'm using or the lure that I'm using, then that is going to create more confusion for the dog to have to sift through. So it's really important if I'm going to do a repetition, especially when I'm in the very early stages of teaching the dog, that I do it very slowly, I'm very methodical, I'm making the same sounds, the same movements, and giving the dog the same amount of time with each repetition. Over time, as a dog starts to learn something more and they become more experienced and they start to imprint this, that's where we can start to speed up the training. We can start to vary the training. We can start to be inconsistent with things to vary the routine for the dog. In the very early part, we need to be super consistent. Once the dog is probably around 80% reliability, so 8 out of 10 times they're performing the behavior as we have been training, that's where I want to start to vary the routine. And those are going to provide additional benefits, because if we are just training the exact same way forever, then we'll have a dog that's pattern trained, and that's not going to be reliable for us in the long haul, because the dog will have only learned to do it in that one situation. So the first side of things, we are teaching the foundation. We're going to slow it down. We're going to be super crystal clear. We're not going to allow that dog to fail. We're going to set him up for success from the very beginning. And then later on, once that dog is actually performing and understanding these things at an 80% reliability rate, we will start to then add more distraction, more distance, more duration. We'll make it more complex and more challenging for the dog. And that is the level of practice that will really drive the dog forwards versus them just basically becoming stagnant in their training. And that's what most people don't realize when they're practicing is, in the beginning, it's slow and it's boring. Once you get through that slow and boring stage of teaching something, that's where it's going to become fun. And that's where we get to really change things up, where we get to engage with our dogs a lot more. And that is what a perfect session should look like, where we're having fun with our dog, we're engaged with them, and they're engaged with us because we're both doing something that we highly enjoy doing. So one of the things that I encourage everyone to do who's training their dog is to keep notes on their training sessions. So if you don't have a journal, get one for your dog that you can write notes into every single time. You can write down what your dog did well with, what they struggled with, how long you spent working on these things, maybe how many repetitions they did. The more clear your notes are, the easier it's going to be for you to pick up from that same place last time. If we're always ending our sessions on a good note, the dog being successful, we should be able to pick back up from there next time we start. And one of the things that I encourage people to do between training sessions is to give the dog some time to not be engaged and to just relax and think. So whenever I finish a training session, I put my dog away and I give them time to soak up and think about the thing that they just spent 10 or 15 minutes working on. And doing this helps us pick back up very easily next time that we get started working on that thing at the same place that we left off. So when it comes to progressing your dog's obedience or whatever behavior it is that you're looking to train them on, it's important to be really clear on where are you actually at. So if you're not keeping a journal, you might actually be starting off further behind than where you left off last time, making it feel like the process of training your dog is slower. If we have really good notes, or if we have video where we can go back and we can see exactly where we left off and what the dog was doing, then from there we can pick back up more easily and progress them at a faster pace. A lot of the times when I see people practice with their dogs, they are just walking around doing repetitions with their dogs mindlessly. They're doing a ton of them. They're having the dog sit every 5 seconds. They're just sit, sit, sit. They're doing lots of repetitions. But the dog is moving so quickly that they're not given enough time to think, to process, to succeed. And ultimately, it creates more confusion for the dog because the dog is not learning that sit means to settle. And really, when we're teaching a dog to sit, it means to teach them to settle. So that's a really good example where trying to put in too many repetitions is ultimately going to affect the quality of training that we're looking to provide. If we really want that dog to understand sit very well, then we need to slow it down. We need to get a really clean, concise, quality rep, have the dog hold it, enjoy it, be rewarded for it, and then move on to our next rep once the dog has reached the mental state that we want them to be in. But most dogs cannot transition mental state in 5 seconds. So if we're going sit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sit, the dog is not given enough time to actually settle into that mind that we want them to have, which is calm and relaxed when they're sitting. So we really probably need to give more like 10 to 15 seconds between our repetitions in order for the dog to be clear, to settle into what it is that they're doing, and be fully aware of what it is that they're being rewarded for. Every time that you interact with your dog, you should make sure that the repetitions of whatever it is that you're looking to teach them are done perfect, done the way that you have practiced each time. A lot of the times what will happen is we'll do our sessions, we'll be really methodical, we'll be really focused, and then we're answering the front door and we're trying to get the dog to sit like we did in our session, but we do it completely differently because there's somebody else at the door and there's a lot going on. So it's really important when you get outside of a session and you are asking for your dog to do these things and you are living your training as a lifestyle, that you need to still maintain that consistency in how it is that you're doing your repetitions until your dog has learned to generalize regardless of what's going on. So the most important thing to keep in mind is it is not about quantity. It is about quality of your repetitions. At the end of the day, it's about how consistent are you. You are the one that is reflecting into your dog. So if you are inconsistent in how you train, so will your dog. So in order for you to have perfect practice, it comes down to you being consistent, you being very self-aware, you looking at your notes, you knowing where you left off last. When you're consistent, that is going to transfer into your dog and into your dog's results that you get. So make sure that you are intentional every single time that you interact with your dog. If you're intentional, that is what is going to allow your dog to have the focus and for you to get the results that you want your dog to have.